We have a guy here that's joined out of the most R-word town in the entire country, which is noted across the YouTube sphere, as there's a bunch of videos talking about it. But he's actually said he's joined the military and now he's having a difficult time. I will say this hits close to home. Today is my birthday. It is a moment of growth, a moment of reflection, and I relate to this like 1,000,000% because I did grow up in a situation similar to this guy that's here. And I guess turning my age, I realize it's good to look back and see how I've changed and kind of things that have, been better through the military and why I think it's important to reflect. So this guy writes, how do I suppress my R? Good afternoon. I have lurked Reddit as a non-user up until now because this is eating me up. A little backstory. I'm from a town in what media and what some people call out as quotations the most racist town in America. I come from Harrison, Arkansas. I grew up with some extremely R parents, especially my mother. If you weren't white, you basically wasn't a child of God, in their own words. I was raised to think anyone that wasn't white had something to hide or a criminal record, etc. My aunt was disowned by my family because she ended up getting married to a Jamaican guy who was a professor at the university she works at. Fast forward to right now, I am in A school in Pensacola. My parents refused to go to my boot camp graduation due to my senior chief and my second class RDCs being African American, and now they won't come see me in Pensacola because I told them my roommate is black. Which, by the way, he has no control over who his roommate is, or who the RDCs were, or who the instructors are, or any of that. I'm surprised they let him join, knowing that would probably be the case. But it says, I don't consider myself a R. However, it comes out subconsciously, if that makes sense. I will give you an example. If someone of color needed assistance, and by the way, him saying someone of color, just that verbiage kind of, strikes a tone of like, you can tell he's come from this background. Needed assistance, I would help them. But say someone of color got in trouble, DRB, captain's mass, etc., I would, quotations, talk to myself and say, typical N-word. Even though I am an adult, it's almost like it's coded in me to do it because on how I was raised and can't just get rid of it. I knew coming into the Navy I wouldn't see people of all backgrounds, but it is one thing to see it than to live it, if that makes sense. It's almost like a culture shock and I need help. What prompted me to make this post is recently a sailor here got hemmed up because either he himself or someone he knows has ties to someone neo-Nazi group, and he is pulled in for questioning. I fear that my family or someone I know might, quotations, drag me down with them in a similar fashion. I've talked to a chaplain, I think he meant, about this, and he recommended I go to mental health, but I already know something like this would get me separated. I am anticipating hate, or some people think this is a troll post, but I truly want to get better, and I don't know who to turn to. I don't want my family history to define me or my new history with the Navy. Wow, this is a deep, just totally to the core post of just reflection and somebody actually annotating that's something that they subconsciously think is bad and they would like to not think that way, which I think a lot of us do have our own biases in whichever way, no matter where you're at on, the spectrum goes. But I can heavily relate. I do want to say there is one person that wrote a comment that I definitely agree with, and I'll go off on my own, background and why I relate to this. This guy writes, you're young, the values inherent to you and your upbringing that you now recognize and believe are wrong will soon be overridden by your own belief system, but it will take time and experience. If you believe something is, quotations, wrong, advocate for and actively pursue doing what is, quotations, right instead. The military is diverse. You're another example of some of that diversity, but your upbringing doesn't have to define you if you don't want it to. Another thing I wanted to share that somebody said that I thought was meaningful was, assuming this is not a shit post, I would refer you to the great American author Mark Twain and his views on how getting out of your little hometown and actually seeing the world firsthand changes you. Quotations, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. You've just taken a great step into a larger world, and if you approach it with an open mind, you'll have much more nuanced opinion of people and cultures than you previously did. For every person you meet that confirms one of your biases, there will be several others that don't. I've been around this great big world and I've seen many different cultures. We are more alike than we are different. And perhaps most importantly, I found myself thinking, if this person had same opportunities and resources that I had, they would be just as successful or more successful than me. It takes humility, it takes an open mind, but most importantly, it takes that step into the quotations. And, you know, I think a lot of people, without getting into the nuance, diversity for the sake of diversity, all that kind of stuff, getting into that, I want to reflect on my own, because I grew up in a situation where I had a stepfather that was very on the spectrum of R. Looking back, I didn't appreciate that until I came in. If you guys have not watched my story of how I joined the military, go click that link up there. It will definitely give some insight on some of the abusive nature of which I was in before I came in. Even so much so that he would tell my mother that she was everybody's N-word if she drove us anywhere. I'm telling you, like, everything was about how these people were not a contributing factor to society. But it's weird because we grew up in a lower middle class, you know, very low middle class, if not, you know, just low class level, that we had people that were of all different varieties around us that had this. And even so much that I thought it was okay at sometimes to use the N-word when it wasn't, even if it was singing a song. And now I look back and cringe entirely on those perspectives, on the fact that I thought that was okay. Granted, the fact, you know, I could say times have changed, but I'm just like, man, what was I even thinking? Even now, I think of that word and it gives like a shiver up my spine. But, you know, growing up in that world where I was kind of in this perspective where I was around people that were not to this degree of extreme of not wanting to be a part of my graduation or my life because I was around these people. I look back now and I'm like, man, how many people I'm probably more friends with now because of the military, because of this notions. And, you know, if you're military right now, I know that it's kind of cheesy to say diversity and all that kind of stuff. I feel like sometimes it can be a little forced. But then I look at like a lot of the people I work with, like if you look at a photo of people you work with, you can probably sit there and be like, wow, we are a pretty diverse group. We're all from different areas. We all have different experiences, and we bring something to the table. And it's kind of crazy to look at until you actually take a step back and look at it and look at those photos. I think I'm a better person at the end of it, you know, looking at my time coming up on almost 14 years in and saying, wow, how much different am I now, you know, after living in Europe for 3 years, living in Japan for 4 years, moving to San Diego across the country that I've never dealt with, seeing Hispanic cultures and things like that. It has changed my views based on what I've experienced and also within the organization itself and seeing where I've been at and being able to travel across to Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, all these other places that I'm like, whoa, my perspective of the world has definitely changed. And one of those things I saw was like in the 2015 era, kind of when I was living in Europe, we had a lot of people like, what if we were just like Europe? I live here. I can tell you there's some things that are good. And then when I was in Japan, there were people like, what if we were just like Japan? There's some good things that are here, but there's also some bad things. And so you get to confront some of those conflicting ideologies. So I'd like to know, where do you guys see yourself that you've changed in the military, or something that you've experienced that you're like, whoa, I now have a different perspective of this. And this is just me reflecting. Again, it's my birthday. Drop a like if you want to help out, watch another video. But I thought this was a great reflection, you know, to look at and kind of my upbringing as far as kind of the rough childhood and seeing racism that happened in my own culture. But let me know down in the comments below if you guys have any other videos or comments or whatever else. You can always hit me up on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, or down in the comments below. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.